I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Swerzik, and today, to my left, normally not at my left, the Director of Engineering, Mitch Mittelstaedt, and across the table, former Senior Ballistic Scientist, Dave Emary. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be here, Seth.
Thanks a lot, Seth.
Yeah, I say normally not at my left because you're normally over in that corner,
over there.
and normally Neil Davies sits over there, and so it's kind of throwing me off my game here. Well, what we want to talk about today is hot, nasty, badass speed, and nothing embodies that more than the 204 Ruger.
Right.
And that is a cartridge that is blistering fast. It's been accurate. People have been using it now for, gosh, I don't know when it came out. We'll get there, but my gosh, it is a varmint hunter's dream cartridge, and accurate, fast, and for shooting prairie dogs and coyotes and stuff like that. Those are two very important things, and it really bridges the gap between some of the smaller center fire and bigger rim fire stuff like the 17 Hornet and the 22 Hornet and the all those other wildcats in that world, or even the 17 HMR, and then the bigger, little bit heavier recoiling rounds like the 22-250 or even the 223. You get a small platform, very efficient, and then just as fast as you can get. So that was kind of a brainchild of Dave Emary and some others here in the fold. And I want to go back to 2000, probably 1 or 2?
I think we introduced that in 2003, and this it was really the next big project after the 17 HMR. And I mean, the 17 HMR, of course, was a tidal wave success,
instant success.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it was a fun little varmint cartridge, and it was effective. And so we said, well, okay, we kind of covered the far left end of the spectrum here. And, 22-250 has been around forever, and that's the master of varmint cartridges and all that kind of stuff. So we said, and at that time, if I remember right, Mitch, the 17s, the 20 caliber was really big
20
at that
caliber
time.
was hot at that
The
time.
20 Vartarg, the PDK,
Yep.
some of those other
Yep. And
20
we said,
tactical.
okay, let's see if we can't develop the ultimate varmint cartridge here that, oh, by the way, will go in an AR platform.
Ooh, yeah.
And
Accuracy through volume.
Yep. Yeah. So basically what we came up with, I can remember Mitch and I sitting down and talking about it some, and we said, look, why don't we take something like the 223 Rem Mag and just simply neck it down to 20? I mean, it wasn't any kind of
the triple deuce.
brilliant idea or anything. It was just
220.
Yeah, 222. Yeah, sorry,
Rem Mag.
222 Rem Mag. And the real advantage of that was and why we chose 20 calibers. One, it was hot at the time, and also because of that smaller caliber, within the cartridge overall length of that, we could get an effectively percentage-wise longer ogive bullet in there, and we could significantly surpass the ballistic coefficient, of the typical 22 caliber varmint bullets. And it's like, with the kind of velocities we can get out of this thing, boy, this is going to be one flat shooting. We reach way out there varmint cartridge.
Well, it definitely does that. When you initially started that design, did you consider going 223, which the 223 practical, which is just a 223 neck down to 20?
I don't.
You needed more payload.
I don't think we ever considered anything.
I don't think
20.
so either. It wouldn't, we could get a little bit extra out of it, and then just like Dave was saying, we could still get an ogive to get a high enough ballistic coefficient, and so we just went for the max on the cartridge case.
And it was, Mitch can talk to the cartridge part of it. The bullets weren't terribly hard to make. We decided, okay, we'll do this with 2 bullets. We'll have a lighter, straightforward, flat-based bullet in a 32 grain, which is going to be blistering fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's do a little bit more elegant, sophisticated, 40 grain bullet with a little longer ogive and a boat tail and everything. Now we're going for BC, a little less velocity, but boy, this thing is really going to get out there.
Yeah.
And probably the biggest technical part of that was there really wasn't any powder that existed at the time that you would say had optimized this cartridge.
Okay.
And we went to St. Mark's and told them we want a cartridge built for this cartridge and these bullet weights that maximizes the performance of
Yes.
this.
So purpose build us a propellant that's going to optimize these bullet weights in this payload capacity. That's, for a powder manufacturer, that's probably not a super tall order, but for, me as a reloader growing up, that's like, it's not like you go to the drive-through and
Well, I can remember so you want us to design a powder just for one cartridge. How much of this are you guys going to sell? And of course, at that time, we were like, well, probably be noticeable, but we can't.
That's not huge numbers.
And it turned into, pretty huge numbers because of how popular. And they were like, holy cow, this thing really took off, you guys.
Yeah.
Hornady Outfitter ammunition is now loaded with Hornady CX bullets. Its optimized monolithic design combined with a heat shield tip offers extended range performance, enhanced accuracy, high weight retention, and deep penetration. Outfitter ammunition features corrosion-resistant nickel-plated cases that are sealed watertight, designed to perform under the toughest conditions. No matter where adventure takes you, trust your hunt to Outfitter ammunition from Hornady.
And at the time, the triple deuce mag, was it popular then? Because by the time I was an up-and-comer, nobody chambered them.
No, I think the 222 the 222 mag for all intents and purposes at the time was elite. So, we kind of brought it back. But some of the things that are interesting on the cartridge case side is at that time in the early 2000s is when Hornady really came on and started making our own cartridge cases at the time.
That's a big deal.
So at that time, we actually purchased all of even our 223 cases from other suppliers, because at that point we really only made the E08 family, I think the OT6 family, I think we made a couple of Magnums. So it's kind of interesting that so in the cartridge case manufacturing side, we built a 204 case before we built a 223 case.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
So that would be the opposite of what anybody else would do.
Yeah.
But actually started out with, because at that point you could still purchase U.S. government surplus case making tooling for $5.56. So using that as the kind of pattern for how thick the sidewall needed to be and use that punch. But of course, 222 rim mag is about an eighth of an inch longer than that case, or almost a 200,000th,
something like that.
Quite a bit.
So we had to change the neck. We had to make the final draw a little bit longer so that we can make a little bit taller cartridge case. And then I also remember one of the nuts we had to crack on that is we put a pretty sharp shoulder on it. So we put the 30-degree shoulder, which now you see is pretty much standard for everything we do.
And at that point in time, we did that because we said, hey, we can get another 0.2 of a grain of powder in the case.
Right.
And, we were pushing this thing for all we could get out of it.
Yeah.
And then, and that also becomes a shoulder on the manufacturing side. That is a practical angle to manufacture, because there are a handful of cartridges out there, the folks know what they are, that have a 35-degree shoulder. Well, in manufacturing a cartridge from scratch, 35-degree shoulders are a real pain in the butt. Your scrap rate's a lot higher. You're just trying to bend that metal so far around, it just doesn't want to bend that way. So
why fight it? Yeah,
exactly. So go as sharp as you can. It's still very efficient. Still gives you a really good headspace surface. And then I also remember on the 204, we fought because you were necking it down further than what that case diameter, is obviously just for 22 cal. We're taking it down to 20 cal. We ended up building up material, and the guys who are target shooters know what I'm talking about. There ends up being a donut of material right at the bottom of the neck going in the shoulder. And then 204 was notorious for forming a big donut at the start. So we went through some things. There's a little bit of secret sauce we can do. And even right now, today, we're still using that tooling, and our 204 cases don't have a donut in them.
How about that?
Just for what that's worth.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Hey, it's, that was us progressing through learning how to do more and more and more things and be self-sufficient instead of depending upon somebody else to do it. Mitch brought it up before we came on here, but the other pretty significant thing in the propellant on this one was when we had them designing this, they said, hey, we started last year putting bismuth pellets in 5.56 ammo for the Army. Okay. And they said, well, what it does is it hardens the copper that's left in the barrel, and the stuff just flakes off and comes and blows out on the next shot. And he said it keeps copper out of the barrel. We said, yeah, sure. Yep. On this cartridge, of course we want to do that.
Yeah.
So that was really the first cartridge that has now the fairly common, bismuth pellets added to it as a decoppering agent.
Wow.
Right. So that's really the precursor. So what Hodgdon puts in the canister is CFE, which is copper fouling eraser. CFE 223 is a version of the 204 powder.
Wow. Is probably a slightly modified.
Modified, right. But pretty darn close.
Wow. Yep. Well, that the spillover effect of you guys wanting to make a really hot rod varmint cartridge now, a commercially available propellant that people use all over the country,
right,
and with good success. That's pretty cool. As far as the cartridge case manufacturing goes, as a company history, being able to manufacture our own brass was critical.
Right.
That was a huge step for us. And, I'm obviously, Mitch, you're a degreed engineer, and I bet that was very satisfying to have a problem set like that and to create some secret sauce to help iron things out.
I mean, that was a whole new cartridge family for us. So then after that, of course, flowed the 223 and the 5.56, and we do make 222 Remington. That one actually still does have some Hales volume. And then strangely enough, we still don't make a 222 rim mag. There's just no, there's no request for that.
There's a lot of hand loaders out there that I know are thankful that we do the 204 Ruger.
Right, because they actually neck those up to get their 222 mags.
Yeah. So the performance, you go to this powder manufacturer, hey, can you make us something custom, truly custom, to really optimize this? You identify your bullet weights, like you had said, Dave. You got the flat base 32 grainer just for the speed, and you got the 40 grain elegant longer ogive boat tail on there. What kind of performance were you seeing from a velocity standpoint initially?
Going into it, I think, Mitch, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was an emotional investment on Ruger and, the management levels of Hornady and Ruger that, we want 4,200 foot per second. We want the fastest commercial cartridge out there. And in a 24-inch barrel, we were getting about 4,100. And we had pushed everything as far as you could push it. It was a full case of ball powder. This was a higher nitroglycerin, higher energy propellant. It was there. So it wound up being, Ruger was going to say, okay, we're going to we will go ahead and we'll publish the standard SAMI 24-inch barrel ballistics, but we're making a 26-inch barrel. And in the 26-inch barrel, this thing produced 4,200 foot per second with the 32 grain bullet. It far eclipsed the 22-250 for velocity versus the BC for the bullet. And then we really kind of said, okay, now we're going to really sweeten the pot here. And this 40 grain bullet we're going to do has got a little bit longer ogive, so it's got, a sleeker profile, and we're going to put a boat tail on this thing. And 3850, am I remembering
39 almost, I think. Yeah, somewhere.
So,
right there.
you got this 40 or 20 caliber bullet that's pushing a 200 BC at 3,900 feet per second almost. And I can remember the first time when writers shot this, they said, man, this thing has just got no recoil. And it's almost instantaneous when you pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Look at this. 100 free bullets when I buy these select Hornady reloading tools.
Wow, 500 free bullets with certain Hornady reloading presses and kits.
Well, what do they have?
Let's get loaded.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench. Choose from the most durable, precise, and convenient tools on the market and receive free bullets to get you loaded. Visit Hornady.com for further details.
Next time we get loaded, I'm buying.
And then that's what I like about 204 Ruger, and that's what I wish. It should be more popular than it is.
Yeah.
Because everybody, if you go to a prairie dog shoot and I take my 204, everybody ends up going and buying one. Because, people who shoot a lot of prairie dogs, people who don't are going to be like, that's kind of gross. But we all know the prairie dog flip. You shoot the prairie dogs and they flip in the air. And you can do that. 22-250 is good for that as far as the terminal side, but it's got enough recoil where you come out of the scope.
Yep.
There's people who have a 12, 13 pound gun and you don't come out of scope on that. But on a normal 9-pound varmint rifle. You come out of the scope with the 22-250, 204 Ruger. You don't come out of the scope, so you get to watch the show.
Yeah.
So it's like a 22-250 where you can watch the show, and that was at a time in my life where I was shooting a lot of prairie dogs. I had just started at Hornady. I'd been there about 5 years. And a lot of guys just from Hornady were shooting. You and Doug Durner would go up to St. Paul and up by Elba and go up there. So I built and surprisingly, that's when I got into AR-15s, which in 2003 weren't nearly as popular as they are now.
Right.
So that was only the second AR I built. The first AR I built was a heavy barrel 24-inch 223 that I built just for shooting prairie dogs. And we started working on this. And I'm like, Dave, we got to make sure it fits in that mag.
Yep.
And so, it fits, it's 2.260, fits right in the mag. And I called it Packnor because they were one of the few companies making a 20 cal barrel. Strangely enough, I talked to John Noveski at that time. He was just getting started. And he was, if you wanted a pre-chambered barrel from Packnor sent the barrel across the street to John Noveski, and he's the one who chambered it. Strangely enough, he wanted too much money to chamber it, so I ended up chambering it out in the tool room and building it myself. So I had a 26-inch Packnor barrel, so I could get everything I could out of it, and man, that's a prairie dog machine. It's almost too fun to shoot. I wasn't good to that barrel, and I let it get really hot a few times.
Just a few?
Every time you shot it. So accuracy started falling off pretty quickly at about 1,300 rounds, which isn't normal. I don't want to get the idea started that a 204 is a barrel burner, but I burnt that barrel down myself. 204 should be good for 2,000, 2,500 easy. Mm-hmm. But I burnt that barrel down, and I built another one and screwed another one on. So
keep them coming.
It is hands down my favorite prairie dog cartridge. Also good for shooting coyotes. It's lights out on coyotes.
Yes, sir.
Like I said, it should be more popular than it is.
When you guys were doing the development process, was Ruger the impetus? Like, hey, we want a varmint cartridge, or was this? We have a cartridge. Are you guys looking for one, or how did that joint venture happen?
Steve talked about this yesterday of how the recipe for launching a new cartridge was you had to get married up with a gun company that was willing to support this and make guns. And as I recall, Mitch and I talked about it and kind of laid out the requirements. I kind of came up with a design, did a bunch of calculations to say, this thing should be, in this range of performance with this weight bullet. And I think the number that originally came out was 4,200, and we got held to that. So we came close, but we didn't quite make it. So that's why the 26-inch barrels. But Steve went and took that to Ruger, and they were instantly,
done.
You guys make that, we'll chamber rifles for it.
Yeah, I think we still have 5 Ruger M77s with the laminate stock with the heavy barrel in the lab.
Yep.
And that must have come out of those initial.
Yep.
That's exactly what those were.
Probably for a rider shoot, I would guess.
Yeah. Well, speaking of rider shoot, I am the handler, I guess you could call me, of the editorial staff. And every year I host at least one, sometimes 2, prairie dog events every summer. Usually that last week in May, first week in June time frame is gorgeous because it's warm enough, the dogs are out. And you got the pups out there, just after the spring, and it's not so ungodly hot that you can't have fun. And I had grown up and heard about the 204 Ruger growing up, but never had a need for one. And I'd never shot one prior to me working at Hornady, and specifically on these rider events to go out onto the prairie in Wyoming. And I always bring an arsenal, you name it, 22 250s, 243s, 6 ARC, 6 Creedmoor. 223, if I didn't say that, 17 HMR revolvers, all kinds of stuff. And the first time I did this, took some of those Ruger M77s that are down there now, and we have a Savage Model 12 right bolt, left port, single shot. Yep. 26-inch big truck axle barrel. I ended up shooting all the guns a little bit, and then I just latched onto the 204 and effectively turned that barrel into a welding rod. I mean, it was, I was ruthless to it, but it was the funnest day of prairie dog shooting I'd ever had. You got typical Wyoming winds, and it didn't matter. Inside of 350 yards, I was gonna hit the dog. It was it was like having an extension of your hand shooting a laser beam.
Yep.
And last year, or just a few months ago, I say last year, just a couple months ago, I had that same event, and the ammo that was available to us was 24 grain NTX. And you want to talk about speed. I feel like the Savage was running like 4250, and that one Ruger that I took was somewhere in the 4180 something range.
Yeah.
And the Ruger's a 24-inch barrel on ours. It was anyways, it's just remarkable. You give that to an outdoor rider who'd never shot a prairie dog before. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I handed it to this particular gentleman and said, "I rule in prairie dog shooting, no laughing and no smiling." And then he pulls the trigger and he sends one 3 or 4 foot in the air, and instantly, we're 12-year-old girls giggling on the prairie. And in the earlier 2000s, when you guys designed this cartridge, you talk about going up to St. Paul. At least for prairie dogs, coyotes are still really prevalent, but prairie dogs around that area. And I grew up not far east of Elba, over by a little town called Wallback, in a town called Belgrade, and prairie dogs were relatively common. And it was probably a great time to release that cartridge. And then you fast forward, Mitch, you said not as popular as you think it should be. Right. You fast forward just a few years, corn hit $6 a bushel. Everything that was prairie dog is corn, at least in our neck of the woods.
Well, they also had that couple-year period where they were talking about making the American prairie dog endangered or something like that.
Species.
And all these guys went out and poisoned out all of their towns because they weren't going to lose their pasture land.
Yep.
And at that point in time, out west of St. Paul, and Doug Durner knew a lot of people out that way.
Yep.
I mean, you could find a lot of prairie dog towns, and there were a lot of prairie dogs out there.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, and we've mentioned Doug a couple times. Doug worked in our lab and also in our customer service area, and really well connected out there. And just here, not that long ago, me and my kids were going up to Happy Jack Peak over by Scotia and North Loop, and we're driving country roads, and darn it, if there isn't a couple prairie dog towns over by Danaverkey still out there. So some of them are probably still out there.
Yep.
And I couldn't help but wonder if maybe that was one of the fields that the 204 Ruger and the 17 HMR got exercised on.
Oh,
I bet it
was.
Could have happened.
The Hornady Rapid Safe Keypad Vault offers quick, dependable access to your firearm while providing security from unauthorized users. The Rapid Safe Keypad Vault is constructed of a heavy-duty 14-gauge steel housing and thick steel lid for tamper-proof security. The included RFID watch band tag and RFID decal can be selectively programmed to open this safe and any other Rapid Safe you own. The Rapid Safe Keypad Vault from Hornady Security.
And, you were talking about how you wish it sold more. There's the prairie dogs, I think, are much fewer now.
Mm-hmm.
And, with some of the political, social changes in the country in the last 20 years, it's just not as and that probably explains a lot of that. But
I think so.
I know, and I remember clearly for about an 8 to 10 year period, that cartridge was almost at the top of the list of our most popular cartridges.
Oh, it was.
It was big.
Yeah, well, and for good reason. It is. I've said this about a lot of things, but it's fun in a box right there. The 204 Ruger, no recoil, especially when you start putting suppressors on stuff, and to go out on a prairie dog town and legitimately, depending on the wind, when you've got in a low wind day, you've got quarter-mile performance where your holdover at a quarter of a mile is about 12 inches.
Right.
You hold about the height of a prairie dog standing on a mound, and you've got a real good shot at hitting them.
Yep.
And if that doesn't put a smile on your face, you need to go to the doctor, because that is something else. And I've heard Steve mention, going back to when his dad Joyce was still alive, that the prairie dog availability around Grand Island, you didn't have to go too far outside the city of Grand Island to get into some prairie dog pastures. Awesome. Yeah, days gone by. But now prairie dogs is one thing, ground squirrels, woodchucks is one thing. I've yet to shoot a coyote with it. I'm guessing you guys have exercised that on the larger game, something like a coyote. Still just as effective, speed kills, but it's a pretty light bullet.
Yeah, but the hydrostatic shock you get once that thing goes through the skin and expands, the hydrostatic shock's going to kill the animal. You don't necessarily even have to penetrate all the way through the animal. You're going to kill him from hydrostatic shock.
That's interesting.
The one, if you're coyote hunting for the fur for the pelt, maybe not so good.
Because you're gonna make a big hole.
You make a big hole.
Yeah, well, understood. And that's anymore not really a point of concern because with the way that the fur market has been, this is tangential. But man, you're not getting much, if anything, for a coyote or a raccoon anymore, which is unfortunate. But the 204 Ruger, super capable. I had never thought I wanted a 204 Ruger until I went to my first prairie dog town and instantly changed my mind because there is something about that speed and the ability. We've talked about this, since our first podcast, but we've been talking about this all week. When you can get a factory rifle and I can just get ammo and I don't have to load it and then it just shoots well.
Right.
That just makes it so easy because if you're going to be shooting prairie dogs out there at range, it's no fun if you're missing them. You got to hit them. And getting ready for those media events like I do, I spend a lot of time and I get every gun dialed in so that when we get out there, pull them out of the box and go shoot. And accuracy is never a concern. In fact, that Savage 12, that left port, right bolt, single shot, lay down, it just stacks bullets. It particularly shoots the 32 grain VMAX well.
Yeah, that flat base is
flat base.
It's just easier to make accurate day in, day out.
Is it? The 40s shoot fine, and the 24s we shot this year, that NTX bullet, they shot well under an inch, and man, that is blistering fast.
The 204 was, the second cartridge in the continuation of this whole design philosophy of putting tight throats in these things.
Tight throats and 100,000 of freebore. So you got a little room to move, but yet you're holding them straight. It's a recipe for accuracy. It really is.
It sounds like a recipe that way. Once you guys figured it out,
we just used it on everything else since.
Yeah, you could almost,
because it works.
Hornady's cartridge design, Dave figured it out once with the help of you and Joe. Copy, paste, scale to size, and then plug and play 204 Ruger, Creedmoor, ARC, PRC, you fill in the blank. But between Savage, Ruger, I know Howa, Legacy Sports, and there's a bunch of other vendors out there that still produce the 204 Ruger.
Right.
It's easy to be accurate. I don't know of any AR companies that are at least mass producing them.
DPMS made one at the time. That was a real good gun. That was actually the replacement barrel I put on mine was a straight fluted barrel from DPMS, which they're still extant in some version, and I don't know if they still sell it or not. I know on the various AR parts manufacturers, you can still get an upper or get a barrel on it.
Yeah, I might have to think about that for next year's media event. Is getting a gas gun and because it's you can manage people when they're opening a bolt and putting it around and closing the bolt, but you get prairie dogs running around in the Wyoming prairie in a gas gun.
Yeah,
it's gonna be
if the barrel starts to droop at the muzzle, you might want to put it down for a little bit.
We'll have to get a little changing handle on it.
Yeah,
be changing uppers like it's a 240 machine.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate what you guys did for the industry with the 204 Ruger, and it's pretty interesting. And I wasn't aware how important that was for us. One, on the cartridge case manufacturing side, and then two, working with that powder manufacturer to get a propellant specific to that cartridge and to really fine tune it to get the highest level of performance possible, which turned out to be an incredibly successful commercially available propellant.
I think it was the cartridge following the 17 HMR that really established that no, the 17 HMR wasn't a fluke. This is another continuation of this whole philosophy we had, where the up curve just kept getting steeper and steeper.
Yeah, Hornady knows what they're doing.
Yep. Well, and it's Dave and Mitch and Joe and that whole crew really laid some damn solid groundwork to subsequently introduce cartridges like the 6.5 Creedmoor, and by using that same design methodology that was the 17 HMR, that was the 204 Ruger, that was the Creedmoor, and like you mentioned just now, Dave, that up curve has been pretty steep in the gun manufacturers. Now we're not working with one gun manufacturer. We're working with 30 gun manufacturers when they roll out a cartridge.
They've been coming to Hornady instead of us.
They're coming to us, knocking on the door. Hey, what's new? What's next? Let's go. Let's get something going.
That's pretty satisfying. So for all of the cartridges, but specifically the 204 Ruger, job well done, guys.
Thanks, Seth.
Anything else on the 204?
No, I
think
just
we pretty well covered it.
I just really encourage people, if you haven't shot one, go shoot one, and it'll become your new varmint cartridge, hands down.
Excellent.
I'd agree with that.
Appreciate it. Well, guys, you heard it here. If you haven't shot a 204 Ruger, go shoot one. Like Mitch said, it will quickly become your favorite varmint cartridge, and it has quickly become my favorite varmint cartridge. We hope you enjoyed this discussion, and we'll catch you on the next one.